And hello again, and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission. Rally our realm, set as we see it, and frankly as well. And frankly, folks, you can see we're informal. It is hot as hell. Paul, how are you?
I'm pretty good, and I think together you and I are going to collude today, huh?
We're going to collude, and it's going to be real hot. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be right into our mission, because we are going to deal with truth. And we're going to deal with reality, not perceptions, not fake news, not the rest of it. Because what is happening in our country today is unconscionable. Yep. And unless you speak up about it, we're doing a disservice.
That's right. I know it. I can't remember the exact quote, but basically, what's his name? Martin Luther King basically said, the day we become silent about things that matter is the day that the world comes to an end.
Oh, yeah. So hadn't Aristotle said that, a lot of other folks, right? Frankly, Joe, folks, pay heed. Colluding is bad. It's shrouded in secrecy with sinister intent. And if accused, the rancid stench sticks like glue, regardless of whether it's true or not. So it is that the left and the media colluded to spray Donald Trump with the odor of colluding.
Isn't that's pretty clever? They colluded to accuse somebody else of collusion.
Not unusual. In 1983, folks, Senator Edward Kennedy did collude with the leaders of the then Soviet Union, a model adversary, during the height of the Cold War, in a scheme to subvert the election of Ronald Reagan.
Hey, can I interrupt you there, because I mean, you're saying here that he did collude. How do you know that?
We have a lot of documentation to that. When I finish this, we'll get right to it.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I know that for absolute certitude.
Okay.
Back, MSNBC and Fox News didn't exist in 1983, and for that matter, neither did the internet, Al Gore aside. But the big three networks did. They existed, and so did the New York Times, and so did the Washington Post. Yet not a sound.
Okay, so keep that in perspective, right? You got.
Yeah, let me finish this, and then we can get into it.
Yeah, New York Times, Washington Post, ABC, NBC, CBS.
They're all around.
All around.
Not a peep.
And they were the only ones, really, right? That's where all the news was reported.
Pretty much had a monopoly.
Yep.
Yet not a sound, not a peep was heard from all. All was quiet on the Western Front. Then along came Trump, and all hell broke loose. So, let's get to collude, Paul. Let's get the definition of collude up there. We got that? Is it up there yet? To collude. It's a verb, you know.
Yep.
And it means come to a secret understanding for a harmful purpose. It's to conspire. It's an evil act.
Right. Right, and you know, just to put it in perspective, we can talk about how CNN, right, with Donna Brazile, and the Clinton campaign all colluded to do a couple of things. One was to undermine Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary.
That's right.
But also to undermine Donald Trump in the primary, because
that's colluding.
CNN, Donna Brazile, and the DNC were in the tank for Hillary Clinton.
What about George Stephanopoulos? He's in the tank every day.
Right.
Every day when he's on TV for ABC, and we'll go back to ABC, because ABC was the vehicle by which Mr. Ted Kennedy, if you can put that up there, who colluded with the Soviets back in 1983 in order to undermine Ronald Reagan to defeat him. To get him defeated.
So you got to tell the audience how it is that you know
Paul,
this to be
you're
fact.
going to be reading about that, and we are going to discuss all of that, but right now we're just going through the system.
Okay.
So get the visuals up there so people understand it. We will fill in the skeleton.
Okay.
We're not just going to throw things out there arbitrarily without documentation and crazy conspiracy theories.
Right.
We're going to methodically make our case like you do in court. You now have to follow up on what I was doing and read your little Frankly Paul,
Okay.
which is an add-on. And the title of yours is The Scarlet Letter. And if anybody out there understands Nathaniel Hawthorne and The Scarlet Letter,
Right.
they will understand what we're trying to say here. Go, Paul.
Okay, so on March 10th of 2015, 47 Republican senators published an open letter informing Iranian leaders that Barack Obama's nuclear deal would likely expire in 2017 when he left office.
Now, this is not 100 years ago.
This is a little over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And the progressives went bonkers, right?
Did they not?
They did. They absolutely blew a gasket. And then, yet in 1991, when a 1983 memorandum surfaced, 8 years after the fact, addressed to then Soviet leader Yuri Andropov surfaced, a deafening silence ensued. According to the Soviet documents unearthed in the early 90s, as well as the 1983 memorandum, liberal lion Ted Kennedy literally asked the Soviets, avowed enemies of the U.S., to intervene on behalf of the Democrat Party in the 1984 elections with the sole goal of unseating President Ronald Reagan. Can you imagine? So you know that old expression, the enemy is my friend?
Were we not allied with the Soviet Union in World War II?
We
This
were.
is nothing unusual.
Right. So further, Senator Kennedy wrote that he would make certain that the networks, i.e. ABC, CBS, and NBC.
More ABC, by the way.
Right. The networks would give Andropov airtime and that they would rig the arrangement. Trump was talking about how the election was rigged.
This is actual rigging.
Would rig the arrangement to look like honest journalism. Have you ever heard? I mean, I would think that journalism doesn't need the qualifier of honesty in front of it, right?
Paul, this was in 1983.
Right. So this is like
This
34
was
years ago.
many years ago, and this is colluding, which is now coming up, and this is fake news, this is propaganda, this is rigging journalism.
And what do we have now?
For what purpose, Paul?
Right,
What was the purpose?
To undermine
The opposition, right?
Right.
In a surreptitious way. Everything that destroys a democracy, this is what this is all about.
Right.
So when today we talk about, the Russians interfering in our elections, well, they actually were invited to do that by Senator Kennedy in 1983. And before.
And it failed then, just like it failed this time.
Well, I wonder when Senator Warren and Seth Moulton, I wonder when they're going to start screaming about this and ask for special counsel to look into it. Don't hold your breath, Paul.
Right.
Don't hold your breath. But let's go back before that. Because in 1980, or pre-1980, who was president?
Pre-1980, it was Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter.
Right.
Do you know that he started against Carter? That he was colluding with the Soviets to undermine Carter? Because he thought Carter was too aggressive toward the Soviet Union? That's documented also. In fact, the FBI, you can look at it right there, Paul, on that sheet.
So
the FBI.
So you're telling me that this guy, Ted Kennedy, was more loyal to the Soviet Union than he was to his own country?
He blamed the friction between the two countries more on President Carter. He was bipartisan on this one, and President Reagan than he did on the Soviets. He was looking for détente. Okay, he was the father or one of the architects, or well, maybe not an architect. Let me restate that he certainly was in favor and pushing for what was known as the nuclear freeze at that time, which is a good thing.
And the nuclear freeze was to...
But it was counteracted. That took away our ability to control events.
Having an edge over the Russians was not in his... He didn't see that as good for...
No, as a matter of fact, he was opposed to the deployment of as Reagan wanted to do and did.
Star Wars, yeah, the defense...
That afterwards, but the deployment of conventional troops in Western Europe and under NATO. So, well, what happened, we almost went to nuclear war in 1983. People don't realize it. It was far more dangerous than Cuban Missile Crisis. Because what happened, and this, folks, don't ever trust computers. They are dumb suckers that understand 0 and 1, period. They're binary, that's it. all this reverence and all this allegiance we give to computers is misplaced. Because in 1983, a Soviet lieutenant colonel was in his bunker, and all they did was look and look and look, waiting for a launch. Their computer said there was a launch, because as we'll find out later, it takes exactly 12 minutes for a missile, intercontinental missile, to come from the Soviet Union or Russia to us and vice versa, okay? So you don't have much breathing space. Once a launch is taking place, if you want to survive, you got to be ready for it. Well, in any case, the computer goes bing, 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 gets the alarm. You know, this is like watching Dr. Strangelove. Follow me? Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. Well, fortunately, the lieutenant colonel said, wait a second. It's showing one missile, then another missile, then another missile, and I'm not seeing any tails. I'm not seeing any explosions that you would pick up on satellite and radar. And they're coming in small numbers. That's not the axiom of the time was you fire it all. Right. You don't hold anything back, right? Mutually assured destruction. Yeah, exactly. And so he says, wait a second. He held off on this. Come to find out, Paul, that it was flying high altitude clouds that the computer mistook for launched missiles. Wow. Huh? So that's that. Now, this was a time of tension. And here you have a senator, a senior senator from the United States, whose ambition is to be what, Paul? President. To be president. So think about this. He tried to undermine Ronald Reagan. And Jimmy Carter. Right. Don't forget, he ran against Jimmy Carter in 1980. Ronald Reagan, who did more for this country in the 8 years that he was president than you know, possibly any person over an 8-year period. But here's what his problem was. And he used Senator Tunney, if you remember him from California, who was his roommate at Harvard, whatever, as his conduit, you know, as his... Plus, he wrote the Scarlet Letter. Now, what he did, in effect, was this. He won, don't forget, he ran against Jimmy Carter in 1980. Right. Right? So he was laying dimes on Carter all day long. I mean, he was the Comey of his time. Right. He was using all kinds of gimmicks. Everything, because he had the ambition to be president of the United States, okay? Right. So, and Carter was a Democrat. So he tried to undermine Carter. That didn't work. Now, when Reagan gets in there, he can't pop him in '84. He's worried about it because the economy is booming. And since the economy is booming, the probability and likelihood of him getting knocked out, except there's only one area in which you could turn the tide, and that's in foreign relations and relations with the Soviet Union. If it looked like Ronald Reagan was the wild and crazy, shoot from the hip kind of guy. That's exactly the way they try to define him. And who colluded with him in all this? The media. Right. Yep. Right? The media colluded with him. Right. He tells you cold turkey in his letter. He says, I can get the media to present you in a way that makes you look really good and reasonable. Right. And instead of saying the bad guy is not you, the Soviet, the bad guy is Ronald Reagan. Right. And Jimmy Carter. And once again, the Democrat, liberal, progressive people are out there trying to say, this is what we do. Not telling you that's what they do, but their MO is whatever we do, we blame the other guy for doing. So anything sinister that we do, we blame it on the other guy. Huh. So that's what the progressives are doing with Donald Trump, right? Has Donald Trump colluded? No. But they're making let's impeach him, let's do this, let's do that. We have hearings going on as you and I are taping the show. Right. Okay? But someone who actually colluded, and historically documented, in which and even when this came out, don't forget, this came out in 1990s, after the fact. Right, with a Democratic president. And when it came out, you read, and even in 2015, they came out and they said, hey, the press hasn't said a word about it. They know about it. They won't touch it. Right. Something that they should be all over. And by the way, who do you think he had in his pocket? What he's talking about cutting a deal with the Soviet leader in order to come to American TV to plead the case that the Soviets are looking for peace and détente, and that the bad guys happen to be those nasty Republicans led by that cuckoo bird, Ronald Reagan, and that nutty idea called Star Wars, right?
Right.
Who do you think he is going to introduce it to? Oh, number one, Walter Cronkite.
Right.
Number two, Barbara Walters. Number three, no one ever heard of him, Elton Raal, who was the head of ABC.
Right.
So,
A trusted name in news.
yeah. So you have the Washington Post, the New York, same players, same actors. You can call it the establishment, you can call it whatever you want. There's a cadre of individuals in our country who have a love affair with socialism, as you can tell, because Bernie Sanders is running great guns now, right? He's going to break away from the Democratic Party, for God's sakes.
Right.
So you have a whole bunch of folks in academia who love the Soviet model and who have been colluding.
Right. Who are
Forever.
singing praise for Venezuela and the way that they've run things, and this country is about ready to.
How about Cuba?
Cuba too, right?
Cuba was the model of communism, socialism in our hemisphere that went down the tank, as did Nicaragua, remember?
And
During the Iran-Contra deal?
still, and the progressives are still in love with the idea.
Yeah. They want to reorder society in their image. And you know what they do?
The end justifies the means with them too. They don't care what they have to do to get to there.
I don't have so much a problem with that. I have a problem with the media not being honest and upfront about it, okay? This show, folks, is trying to get truth out there, honesty out there. Now, could we be in error? You know, is there maybe a little more passion? But it's documented. These are things happen. And if you want to research it, just punch in Ted Kennedy and the Russians, and you'll find everything.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, folks, when Joe spotted this on the internet and sent me some information on it, I was flabbergasted at all the things that are going on out there. So please, you know, don't take our word for it. Go look it up yourself and
It doesn't take that much research.
At how sinister Ted Kennedy was. He did in a most significant way everything that they're accusing Donald Trump to do. And by the way, Donald Trump could never do what Ted Kennedy did because Donald Trump has everybody against him. Everybody in the establishment, whether it's
including the Republicans.
in the media.
Right.
Which, you know,
Now, we're talking about the establishment Republicans. Okay.
right.
Now, that being said, if you folks locally, Howie Carr, he cuts it two ways. Some people love him, some people hate him. But he wrote a book called Kennedy Babylon. Fascinating book. I got it Father's Day early from my sweet daughter. Thank you very much, Beth. And I read right through it. It's an easy read, fascinating. He has in here, he has a section about this memorandum, this letter, scarlet letter. And it tweaked my curiosity, which is why I went onto this research band to say, wait a second, does Howie Carr have an axe to grind? What, is he just trying to sensationalize, or what is it? Lo and behold, very respectable folks all over the place. You know, somebody from London, The Guardian wrote about it, 1990, 205, 215, and it's been in books, and it's footnoted, the whole thing. And I'll get it to you, folks, but you can look it up yourself. And that's it. And yet the press hasn't even taken a look at it.
Right.
When a rookie like me can find all of this information out with ease, and you would think that these journalists from the Columbia School of Journalism,
honest journalists.
There aren't any, Paul. I mean, that's what he said. He wants these big, they're going to pretend to be, he stated it.
Right.
He said, listen, he says, we're going to put it across, we're going to rig it,
To look
and
like
we're going to
honest
make it
journalism.
look like it's honest journalism,
Right.
meaning there is no honest journalism.
The introduction of fake news.
In 1983, Paul. So, frankly, nothing has changed. I'm just trying to remind you folks, we've been colluding, and our politicians have been colluding with Russia for as long as I can remember.
Right.
Okay, including World War II.
And probably the least collusion that's going on is...
It's with Ronald Reagan. That's the irony of it all.
Oh, I mean, with Donald Trump, right?
What?
Right now, there's no colluding with Donald Trump and the Russians.
Ted Kennedy, documented, was praising Soviet leaders, praising them over and above Jimmy Carter and the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan.
Right.
Saying how wonderful they were.
Hey, can you show...
And
you
they
put up
say, and they get all upset at Trump, who turns around and says, well, no, maybe I can work with Putin. Oh, my God. He's a thug. What do you think these other guys were in the Soviet Union? You think they were nice guys?
Right.
What was the thing you were going to ask? I'm sorry.
You had that. You have that one.
Which one?
This one here. I want to show it. What it is.
Which one? This one here?
Yeah.
America First? Pedro, if you would, we have one here, America First. And this is what's happened in this country. Is it up there, America First? It's a little skipping around. And if you take a look, you'll notice that in 1980, that little advertisement from Ronald Reagan, Paul, you can see it, I can't. Read it for me.
Let's make America great again.
Who said that?
Ronald Reagan for the 1980 campaign.
And right now in 2017 it says, make America great again, right?
Yep, Donald
now,
Trump.
Is he plagiarizing? No, all he did was he trademarked that. He didn't say I came up with that idea. He simply trademarked that slogan, right? It came up from Ronald Reagan. You know, he looks at Ronald Reagan as his mentor, does he not?
He does. Yeah.
Okay. How is the economy under Ronald Reagan, Paul?
Booming.
What's happening to the economy right now?
By the way, you know, the stock market is up 16% since the election.
Yeah, it's about $3 trillion worth of wealth that's been created.
And I have to admit, I don't watch ABC, CBS, or NBC, but I don't see anything in any newspaper unless you go and look at, you know, true financial reporting. They don't report how well the stock market is doing because.
Of course not.
So if the stock market is up 16% in 5 months, why wouldn't that be big news?
Folks, that helps your retirement. Any of you folks that have mutual funds
or stocks
or retirement, it's helping you. It's guaranteeing you. Understand that.
And that's built on a premise that the American people are becoming confident in what's going on in this country. So all the pundits, all the noise that you hear on MSNBC, CNBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, all the noise that you're hearing on that is trying to distract you from the reality. Why don't you just look at what's actually happening out there? Notice that when you look at your statement for the end of June, or say the end of March, and you see how well it's doing. That's a reflection of what the sign of the times is, not what George Stephanopoulos is saying on ABC.
Or forget about him.
Any
Or Rachel Maddow or the whole MSNBC to completely. Look, there's a very simple issue. Paul, I've talked to you about this before, and folks, try to understand where I'm coming from. Centralized government is not a good thing. Monopoly of any kind is not a good thing. It's very dangerous. You have no choices. Now, if you want to control, which is exactly what centralized government wants to do, wants to control every aspect of being, it has competition. It looks at its competition. It can't have competition. Now, what is really competition for controlling government? One would be God, religion of God, right?
Yep.
And the other competition is family.
Right.
Because those two institutions, there are people, as we're speaking now, in Syria, in the Middle East, who are being crucified and burnt at the stake for their faith, Christian faith.
Right.
Coptic Christians, right?
Yeah.
And nobody is saying 2 words about it.
Right.
Okay? So, religion is problematic.
It's the biggest competitor to the state.
Secular state.
Right.
But our founding fathers founded our state on we are endowed by our Creator. They based all of our laws and our Constitution on divine law.
Right.
Very much like, by the way, the Islamic faith, because they're saying their law, whether you like Sharia law or the Sunni or whatever, they're saying that God's law, whether it's Allah or whomever, right, supersedes man's law. That's what they're saying. So they're not fans of the secular state. The Soviet Union was a secular state. It was one of the only, if not the only, secular state in Western Europe of its time, correct? Mm-hmm. Because every other country was based on divine right. You rule by divine right. So the Soviet Union became the first major secular Western because China has never had a state religion.
Right.
So we model ourselves. We didn't model ourselves. Founding fathers didn't. But academics and leftists, they liked that model. What was peculiar about the Soviet state was atheistic. Folks who didn't believe in God.
Right.
Right?
They didn't build it into their equation. And this, I think you're leading up to the Ronald Reagan quote, right?
In 1984, Mr. Diaz, one of the finest young men you'd ever want to see, who has a very strong spiritual base, is going to put up on our screen, he already has. Read that for me, Paul, because
Okay.
I think it's very telling. This is 1984.
Right. This is a quote from Ronald Reagan. Without God, there is no virtue, because there's no prompting of the conscience. Without God, we're mired in the material, that flat world that tells us only what the senses perceive. Without God, there is a coarsening of the society, and without God, democracy will not and cannot long endure. If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be one nation gone under.
That was in 1984, Paul, when I was a young puppy.
Right, because there's the progressive movement is built on the secular state kind of model, right?
Exactly.
It's really trying to ward off the competition, which is Judeo-Christian values, right?
Precisely. And also, in all fairness, Islam is joined at the hip to the Judeo-Christian model. I mean, all three religions emanated from the same place.
Right.
And they have the same concept.
Right, and if you take out all the fringe stuff,
Yeah.
stuff that people dispute, I mean, for example, just basic, like the Ten Commandments.
They work everywhere.
If as God-fearing men and women of this country, we just follow the Ten Commandments, don't you think things would be great?
Yet the secular state threw them out of the schools.
Right.
But they made the school sanctuary. You see, this is the utter insanity of what's happening. So they'll look at me and they'll say, he's an old white guy. You know how they are, right? And they'll push it aside. There are transcendental, time-honored values that we should never, ever abandon, that cannot be modified and made relative.
Right.
Aristotle, pretty sharp guy, he reconciled the conflict between absolutism, thou shalt not, and relativism. He said a tree is a tree is a tree. However, trees change. So in essence, a thing is a tree, but it also is constantly changing. So he was able to bridge these philosophical gaps to try to understand humanity and reality, which we try to understand here. We've eliminated some of that. There are folks who do not believe in absolutes. An absolute is, thou shalt not kill. That isn't maybe you shouldn't kill.
Right.
There's no if and buts about it.
Right.
Thou shalt not. That's didactic, okay? This is what we're missing. Now, within that realm, there's also relative situations,
Right.
okay?
Yep.
All right, so, Paul, if you're coming after me with a machete, I'm sorry, I'm going to kill you,
Right.
okay? So in this instance, thou shalt not kill goes by the boards,
Right.
all right? So this is where we failed to make see, once upon a time, they actually taught ethics at the schools. When I went to Boston College, I had to take a course in ethics, mandatory. In fact, we had to take philosophy, 5 years worth of philosophy. Thank you very much, Boston College, for allowing me to learn how to think.
Right.
Which is something that is anathema today. It's feelings.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a report that says that the public school system is coming up way short in teaching critical thinking skills. Way short.
May I read a couple of things here just to point? All right. I have a big smiling face on this. Despite the network's eagerness to tout Democratic opposition to the GOP letter, that's the letter of 2015.
Yep.
Okay, in which they said to Iran, oh, by the way, this is not a treaty because Obama never came to see us. And by the way, unconstitutional because only the Senate can make treaties. Okay?
Right.
Never went there. So they're saying in the letter that they sent out there, 2 separate occasions, the big three, those are the networks, ignored a letter penned by former Senator Ted Kennedy, written to the Soviet Union in 1983, aimed at undermining President Ronald Reagan's nuclear negotiations with the communist regime. This, by the way, is March 10th, 2015. This is not out of date, right? Jeffrey Meyer. Go back down. Forbes, 1991. Tim Sebastian, reporter for the London Times, came across an arresting memorandum composed in 1983 by the top man in the KGB. The memorandum was addressed to Yuri, the top, at that time, he was sick, by the way, he had dialysis, and he was the head of the USSR. Subject, Senator Edward Kennedy. And here is the letter that Kennedy sent to the Soviet leader. And I quote, Kennedy's message was simple. He proposed an unabashed quid pro quo, Paul. Kennedy would lend Andropov a hand in dealing with President Reagan. In return, the Soviet leader would lend the Democratic Party a hand in challenging Ronald Reagan in the 1984 presidential election. That is historically accurate. And I got to listen to all of this noise today about how nefarious Donald Trump is. And none of this.
Right, it never comes up.
Exactly. And you can go on and on with this stuff. So it's almost beyond belief. And, you know, what can I tell you? So, I think we should probably move to a lighter note. Any questions on this, Paul? Any comments?
No, this is like amazing stuff. And I just want to maybe conclude by saying that...
Wait a minute. There's one other thing. Folks, you hear about the CIA, you hear about the NSA, right? Yeah. You hear about the FBI, who are all investigators gathering information.
Right.
But has anybody ever asked this critical question, which is, what good is gathering information, investigating stuff, if you're not very good at analyzing it? You don't know what to make of it. What good is it, Paul? You can do all the research, you can do all the spy versus spy, all the information you want. If you don't know how to analyze it, and you misanalyze it, you don't have the skills, it's useless. And it's dangerous.
And I'll take it one step further, and it is very dangerous if you're using it for, you know, you parse out what you want so you can move politically on people. And that's really what's going on here. I mean, they just take a piece of information about, you know, it's like this, like former Senator Jeff Sessions, who is now the Attorney General. He actually, as part of his job as a senator, met a Russian diplomat at the RNC thing in July. It's part of his job. It was with 100 people in the room, shook hands. It was nothing more than that.
And he was never with him alone. There was never any.
Right. Yet they're saying he should resign because he lied on his application.
So is this in the best interest of the United States? Is it? Is all this foolishness, is it constructive? Is it helping people get affordable health care? Is it helping us take care of our immigration problem? Is it helping us with our economy? No.
Right.
Well, and for what reason?
And let me get back to, you know, we can correlate this to, you know, beefs that you and I have had over the years with how we were treated as politicians locally, how the organized minority within the city government saw us as a threat to their establishment, so that they worked hard to, you know, keep us or knock us out of power, right? So we could not continue to do things that were good for the community, good for the city, good for the people.
Well, particularly
and that's the exact same thing that the Democrats are doing.
Of course.
They are doing they do not want to see the Republicans succeed, and that's got to be treasonous, shouldn't it be? Yes. If they don't want to see them succeed?
Here's the part. I don't really want to get into Republican-Democrat because it's not Republican-Democrat. It's progressive, ultra-liberal who happen to have captured the once noble Democratic Party. They latched onto it. The sin is that there aren't any Democrats who have the courage to say, hold it, because they get exorcised from the party because the organized minority, otherwise known as the liberal left, will beat them in primaries.
Right.
They'll knock them out of office. That's the problem.
Right.
It's, you know, the Democratic Party that I grew up in was a very noble
Right.
institution.
Blue Dog Democrats from the 70s,
Sure,
right?
but that doesn't exist anymore. It's those folks that got Reagan elected. I'm sorry, yes, Reagan elected,
Right.
I'm not sorry, and Trump.
Right. So let me just add a piece of this thing. So
Right.
I was looking at some statistics in the Boston Globe the other day, right? And the statistics basically broke down the electorate in Massachusetts: Republican, Democrat, Independent. Now, you at home, just think about this. We are a Democrat state. We are one of the most liberal states in the Union, right? So staunchly Democrat, right? So you would think that more than half of the people in this state are liberal left Democrats, right? Wrong. The fact of the matter is that only 30-something% of the people that have registered to vote in the state of Massachusetts are actually registered Democrats. There is a majority of the people are unenrolled. So what does that tell you? When a liberal left minority, organized minority, can dictate the view, a worldview about the state of Massachusetts as being decidedly left-wing as a state. We're not. We're just controlled by.
But you fuck out the other part. It is true that 30% of Massachusetts are Democrats, right? Registered Democrats. But only 9 or 10%.
11, yeah.
11%. So there's a 3-to-1 ratio in favor of the Democrats. The independents, even if they split even, the Republicans got no shot.
But my point is, the view from afar, in the media, you know, my view of things, the way the Boston Globe portrays things, the way the Herald portrays things, the way we're portrayed nationally, is that we are as a state, we are progressive left-leaning, very progressive left-leaning. But we're controlled by such a small percentage of the population, which is a piece of the Democrat Party, not even all of it.
But that piece that you're talking about transcends the Democratic Party. It's also exists with what is known as the Republican Party, known as rhinos.
Right.
So it's an elite, Paul. It's an elite group that uses the parties. The parties are being used.
Right.
Because in our system, you have to be one or the other, basically.
That's my point in all this.
Right.
So if we have 40-something or 50% of the population refuses to be aligned with one political party, right? How can we be a, quote, Democrat state? And the only reason for that is because the small minority that controls the state is hoodwinking and using propaganda.
But they also control the media. The Boston Globe is not a paradigm of truth.
No, it's not.
Okay.
And that very story that I was referencing earlier, where they had a breakdown of the electorate by party affiliation. If you read it really quickly, it looks like the Democrat Party is the 50%. They really, you know, if you read it real quick,
they tweak, yeah.
They do it intentionally. The whole idea is to make it look like we really are a Democrat state. So all you folks at home that say, I'm a Democrat and I always vote Democrat, think twice before you vote Democrat, because you're not really voting for the principles that your parents raised you on. You're really not.
Well, we're going to move on because we don't have that much time left in the show. Folks, if you want us to continue down these paths, let us know.
Before we jump on, do we have time to talk about a couple of local things?
Yeah, when we finish off this, we have 15 minutes left.
Okay.
The local stuff will happen. We're not trying to avoid local. I like local, but there hasn't been anything spectacular happening.
There was a pretty significant thing happened. Is coming up tonight, I think. Or
right, we'll
actually,
get to
last night.
We got to go through our script, and then we have time on the comments.
Okay.
We'll do it on the comments. Witty, our witticisms, and they're coming up. So, I can totally keep secrets. Did you know that, Paul? Can you totally keep secrets? It's the people I tell that can't. My favorite mythological creature is the honest politician.
Yeah, right.
You have those, Paul.
I don't think
look
I do.
around. You can see them up there.
Oh, here we go.
If you see me smiling, it's because I'm thinking of doing something evil or naughty. If you see me laughing, it's because I've already done it.
And who's that quote from, do you know?
No. A fine is a tax for doing wrong. A tax is a fine for doing well.
I like that.
You do.
And that brings me, it reminds me of one of the topics that we have to talk about later.
Keep going. A liberal.
A liberal is just a conservative that hasn't been mugged yet. I love that one.
Keep going.
And then stop repeat offenders. Don't reelect them. And then the consensus after the election is that 100% of Americans think 50% of Americans have lost their minds.
There's a lot of truth there, isn't there?
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Mark this down, folks. On September 26th in 1983, 2 days after my birthday, Operation Able Archer, a war game exercise, nearly sparked the nuclear war when satellites mistook high-altitude clouds for launch missiles.
Right,
I mentioned that earlier.
Wasn't there was a movie, remember the movie called, I think it was called War Games, where the computer actually accidentally almost started the war?
They brought the academic,
Right, yeah.
you know, from, you know, to talk them for the password.
Right.
You know, who wins, who wins. Flying time, and I mentioned this earlier, of an intercontinental ballistic missile from Russia to the U.S. or vice versa is about 12 minutes. There's no time to recover. You know, Paul, it's hard to win an argument with a smart person, but folks, it's damn near impossible to win an argument with a stupid person. I particularly like this. Art is how we decorate space, and I love art. If you notice around us, we do a lot of art. But music, my friend, is how we decorate time. It's a beautiful sentiment.
It really is. That's
Now,
wow.
things to think about, Paul. You like quotes. Get to those, and you have to mention who they are and the rest of it.
Okay.
Things to think about. Here we are, folks,
Okay.
with the things to think about.
So this is what Benjamin Franklin said. Any society that would give up a little liberty to gain a little security will deserve neither and lose both. And that's so true. You know, this NSA, those sinister guys from the NSA get on, they come on and they go before the Senate committee and they say, look, just give us the right to look at everybody, you know, who cares about the Fourth Amendment? We don't care about that stuff. Just give us that right and we guarantee that we'll protect you.
Who do you think the biggest protector of that addict would be in the U.S. Senate today? Who do you think is the proponent of that sentiment?
Opponent or for?
No, proponent.
Proponent would be John McCain and Lindsey Graham.
No, John McCain is, without a doubt, the most bitter, sinister human being. I have thrown him off the hook. There's a picture of him in Drudge today that he looks like, you know, the devil incarnate. All he wants to do is go after Donald Trump for no good reason except for animus, and that is wrong. No, the person who's all about liberty is Rand Paul, the libertarian, because this is what it's talking about. You don't give up any liberty to gain security.
So you're talking about the reverse. I was
proponent.
saying
a proponent of this statement.
Right.
Who's in favor?
I thought you were asking for the proponent of the NSA.
Well, now you're right.
Right.
You know, you're probably right about John McCain in that sense.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, because he's you know tied in with
I am really
all those
disappointed
war
with that man.
Yeah,
I'm
me
serious.
too.
Next.
Thomas Jefferson said, banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies. And he's right. I mean, look at what happened when the banks collapsed in 2007 and 8.
Oh, they're too big to fail, Paul.
Right.
So,
and
by
you know
the way,
what? A long time ago, we have built a system to prevent banks from getting too big, and we abandoned it.
did that?
And all we had to do was go back to Clinton.
No. That was Andrew Jackson. He went against Nicholas Biddle. I didn't want.
Oh, you're
didn't
talking
want a
about the
national
creation
bank.
of the national bank.
Right. But let me go one step further with you. What did Ronald Reagan and the wonderful Republican Party of today do this week to help this out? They pulled back on Dodd-Frank,
some of the
which is
regulations.
exactly what Thomas Jefferson was ailing against.
But let's talk about this Glass-Steagall Act, which was in place from the 30s, and it was repealed in the mid-90s, which allowed commercial banks to merge with investment banks, right? That was the single biggest thing. So that allowed basically investment bankers who take a lot of risk to kind of essentially use the funds of a commercial bank, which is yours and my savings, and when that goes bad, everything goes bad. So they allowed them to merge. So when they're trying to fix that, you would think that they would say, why don't we go back to the Glass-Steagall Act where we separate them out and preclude those, you know, the investment bankers from being tied in with the commercial bankers, right? But no, what they do is they create this convoluted rule, Dodd-Frank. It's probably got some good pieces to it,
Paul,
but
this Goldman Sachs and Lehman Brothers and the rest of them were giving a ton of money to these politicians. How do you think they fund their campaigns?
Right.
So they're in the pocket of these folks. I mean, that's the reality. And, Bernie Sanders likes to talk about breaking them all up. He paid effectively less federal income tax, half as much as Donald Trump.
Right.
So, I mean, they're all full of it. And by the way, he made $1 million last year.
Yeah. He's doing okay for himself.
Yeah. Be careful when you fight the monsters, lest you become one.
No, we should be careful of that.
My boy. No. I have no desire to deal with monsters.
So Confucius say,
yes,
everything has its beauty, but not everyone sees it. I like that.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Benji's back again.
Ben Franklin, God heals and the doctor takes the fees.
Doesn't that sound familiar? Now I wish the government would get out of there and understand that God's the healer. And doctors, by the way, should take the fees because they are instruments of science, God, right?
Right.
Okay. I count him braver, whoever comes his desire, than him. Notice that? Than him. I don't know why it shouldn't be than he, but I may be wrong. Aristotle's sharper than I am. His desires than him who conquers his enemies. For the hardest victory is over self. This is particularly true, Paul, for people, and I hate to point out to you, people in AA or people who have had to fight their demons, who happen to have me when I smoke or gambling. There's a lot of truth to that. Aristotle was pretty smart.
Yep, getting over those desires is
Now, we're
not an
going
easy
local,
thing.
but before we go local on the comments, I have to go local before you.
Okay.
And Dave Riley, one of the all-time best, one of our producers here, is there going to be a show? This was a question asked from one of our folks. Is there going to be a show on why the city of Lynn is inspecting our trash and recycling barrels? I don't know anything about that.
Well, apparently they're going around and actually looking inside them to make sure that they actually have recycled materials in there, because I guess there's been the whole idea is if it's good, clean, recyclable stuff, then the city can save a lot of money. But if they start throwing banana peels in there and stuff like that,
So the blue one's the recycling bin,
the
right?
bigger one.
Yeah.
There's a big one and a small one.
Well, let me get this note from Dave for you folks out there. On the Recycling Works in Lynn Facebook page, they state this is a grant-funded activity to get Lynners to recycle better. It's a little bribery here, huh?
Yeah, and we have it up on the screen, so you can go there and check that out. I think it'll be helpful for the city. And and this is a perfect time. Can I segue now? But dying to segue into this local
Go ahead,
issue.
go do it.
So, I was reading in the paper today that the city council is contemplating a fee for trash removal. A fee for trash removal to raise $2 million a year, because they can't raise taxes, or they won't raise taxes, or whatever. So they raise fees, which I'm trying very hard to understand what's the difference. But basically, they want to charge a fee to 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6 family apartments, because they don't do a good job of recycling, and they're going to charge more for absentee landlords.
Who is going to pay it? That's not going to be spread into Ward 1 or Ward 2 in the single family, is it?
No, actually, so the single...
So this is a good concept. So what they're saying in effect, that landlord is responsible.
Right, and basically this is the landlord that, back when I was on the council, I remember they used to always squawk about the absentee landlord because they didn't take very good care of their property and that kind of stuff, and and this is kind of a sister kind of issue.
So let me get this straight. This is something I think I could support, if I understand it correctly. What they're saying in effect is that multiple families beyond the 3-family, beyond
2 family and up, non-owner occupied.
Non-owner occupied.
Right.
All right, so anything that's investment real estate.
Right.
Investment real estate. Would this also pertain to the proposed apartment buildings they're going to put down on the Linway?
Probably not, because I think they handle their own trash.
Well, if they handle their own trash.
Then it's a moot point.
Right.
Yeah.
But if they're using the city's trash collection, then the landlord who's receiving rents should pay more and charge more rent to his folks for making a mess.
Or
Or what?
as an alternative to that is to work harder at making sure that his property or her property does not pose, the health hazards that attract rats, and does a better job of recycling, So what they could do is they could say, I tell you what, let's just give a good example. So let's say that a four-family, a non-owner occupied four-family is going to be charged $100 a month.
Yeah.
For trash,
Yeah.
right? $100 a month per unit. So that's $400 per month that the landlord is going to have to pay. Now, if he goes to the tenant and says, I'll reduce your rent by $50 a month if you do a better job of recycling,
Yeah.
everybody wins, right? The amount of money that would go down that the landlord would have to pay, and the property value would go up because the property itself would be in better.
But then your revenue on the tax revenue is going to go down too.
Well,
yeah, this is what kills me about government.
That's an important thing because while this is like the sin tax. They always come up with these. Let's tax the
We're
sin.
going to keep jacking up the price of cigarettes to get more revenue, and then like a guy like me who quit smoking, where's the revenue?
Right, and that's the problem because the intention behind the city council raising it is to get the money. It's not to improve the city.
What does everybody have to do? Most of us. We have to have employment and an income. So if you're, and I'm not a fan of this, but if you're serious about raising money in the city of Lynn, then institute a city tax. What can I tell you? And
Right. Well,
it's a bad idea as far as I'm concerned. But if they want to raise revenue,
well, if the progressives take over the corner office, maybe that's what will happen, right?
no, we'll become a sanctuary city, and we'll invite in all types of problems. Okay, and which will absolutely destroy the school system and the budget, and that's the end of it.
Right.
So, no, progressives, we already know what progressives do. We have two cities, Detroit, Stockton, and others on the way, progressive. We have progressive countries like Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, and I go on and on. They all did it. They're all down the tube.
Right.
You want to go progressive? Vote for Bernie Sanders. Vote for liberal Democrats. Be my guest. I don't have that much longer on earth.
So one last thing I just want to bring up, and
Is what?
For all you East Lynners who haven't been out by the new Market Basket, you got to get out and check out the new Rotary. I think
They're in love with that Rotary.
I think they call it a roundabout or something like that.
No, you call it egg something or other.
Right.
Eggabout.
Eggabout.
All right.
Right. But anyway, it's really going to allow traffic, I think, to flow much smoother up in that way. So if you haven't had a chance to go through the roundabout in McDonald's, was it McDonald Square? No, Market Square. Go through it. It's really pretty cool.
You enjoy it?
Well, it's been tough because every once in a while they close one of the lanes or they block off one of the streets or whatever because they're still working on it. But
Rest of the comments. We got about a minute. One I really liked is right to the point, Paul. You see the very first one? Right to the point. I loved it.
yeah, it just says on point as always.
I like that part. On point as always. Go ahead.
And this one I really like. So we need money in the city of Lynn is responding to the fact that we have this budget deficit. Last week we had the mayor on, $8.5 million deficit we talked about. By the way, she did a good job last week, didn't she? The mayor?
She did.
Yeah.
She was very good.
So need money? Question mark. Ship some off to Marblehead, Hamilton, and Andover, and then watch the money come flowing back.
Oh, so true, huh? Folks, we're going to invite anybody who wants to come on to this show to discuss things of importance. We don't care about fringe elements. I mean, if these fringe, we're going to have a meal tax for, fraction of a percent. It solves no problems. Let's talk about how we can together, right, Paul?
Yep.
Make Lynn a better place, make Massachusetts a better place, and make, the country a better place. And it's not going to happen with people picking and choosing these fallacious arguments that are strictly self-serving because someone wants to maintain office or aspire to higher office. That bothers me. Why all of a sudden do people decide to run for this office or that office, like an upgrade, right? They're looking for power or money.
Or both.
Or both.
Right.
But I'm looking for people who are interested in making the city a better place. Paul, you mentioned last week with the mayor, okay? Now, I happen to think the city's looking half decent. It's a little cleaner, it's a little better, it's a little better organized. We'll get into that later, You You folks out there, we're not going to collude anymore. We're going to wish you a great week. Until we meet again, bye-bye.